Hi there. I'm Jim Schneider. I'm a writer and a dad, and author of my very first book, Fence Bat, A Big Kid's Guide to Parenting, Personal Growth, and Play. I'm joined here by my daughter, Amelia, today, who's kind enough to ask the questions in the Q&A for me. Thank you, Amelia. So thank you to Boulder Bookstore for having me. And I'm excited to share a few thoughts about my book. Amelia, if you want to take the questions and go ahead and ask away.
What- Can you give us a very brief
Synopsis.
synopsis of your book?
I'd be happy to. So basically, my book, Fence Bat, is so the title comes from a game that Amelia and her brother Henry invented in our backyard, where they basically, they're game inventors. That's right. During the time of when we were in COVID lockdown, because we had to get creative about ways to have fun and do things. And so, what the book is essentially is a collection of stories from 2020 and 2021, a time in which I wrote a daily blog called Parenting Productivity in Quarantine, or P's and Q, which was all about kind of adapting my professional life to also being a parent, staying at home with the kids who are also staying at home, and everything I learned along the way. So I wrote that daily for 450 days into 2021 and learned quite a lot about myself, about being a parent. During that time, we faced a lot of the same kind of struggles that all families did in dealing with the changes that were happening in the world during COVID. And on top of that, we also got my son's autism diagnosis during that time and needed to work to find him proper support, and really came to better understand who he is and learn about neurodiversity and a lot of things like that. So a lot of this is talked about in the book through a kind of a collection of humorous stories and memoir that I want to share with other folks who I'm sure went through some similar things during those times. What's the next question, Amelia?
What inspired you to write this book?
What inspired me to write the book was basically having started this blog. So when COVID started, I started the blog on the very first day of the schools being shut down. At that time, we thought it would probably last for a couple of weeks. So I thought, well, what the heck? I'll just try this as a writing exercise and see if I can write a little something every day. And the more I got into it, and then the more it went on and on, it became sort of a self dare I had with myself to keep going. And what I discovered as a writer during this time was, I've written a lot professionally for magazines, and I've written kind of a lot of humor and things like that. And in many ways, I feel like I've generally used writing to hide, to create kind of a narrative, or, hide behind it a little bit. And what I began to discover was the power of honesty in my writing, of really getting into talking about what was really happening and the anxieties I was feeling. And even the fact that we got Henry's autism diagnosis about a month after I started the blog, it took me another 4 or 5 months to be able to even talk about it. Even though I was writing about our daily life, I just kind of left that part out because I wasn't sure how to talk about it. And one of the things I discuss in the book is the importance of, really leaning into these kinds of things, because I was scared as a parent when we got the diagnosis. But the fact is, once we started getting him the support he needed and learned more about how he works and what we can do to help him, I'm really thankful for it, because it's really helped us to see who our son truly is. And it's really helped us as a family grow together. So I wanted to share some of that in this book to give a kind of an example to other parents who might be facing similar fears.
Can you describe for us what your family's first day in lockdown was like?
Yes, I have a chapter in the book that talks about this. Basically, it was a little like, okay, this is weird. We're not really sure what's going on. I felt kind of nervous about stores starting to close down, and what we would need to have in the pantry, and just in case. And what I distinctly remember about that day was, having to work, and the kids were kind of just doing their own thing in the morning. And I thought, this isn't going to be so hard, which I actually think I said out loud at one point, which was a terrible jinx. And then in the afternoon, it just turned into pandemonium. Henry was asking for snacks every 2 minutes, and he wanted to sit next to me and hold my hand, which makes typing very difficult, as it turns out. And I remember the day kind of ending with Henry outside playing in a pile of leaves, and I'm just seeing like dirt and leaves flying past the patio door, and my son looking like one of the Lost Boys from Peter Pan running around. And I thought, okay, maybe this was going to be a bit of an adventure during lockdown, and it was. But we all came together pretty well through it. But that's what I remember about the first day. Yes.
How different was your day-to-day life like now versus what it was like pre-pandemic?
That's a good question too. It is very different because I sincerely believe, and this is kind of one of the premises of the book too. We all, as a society, went through something there for a couple of years, and human beings are resilient, and we come through the other side. But I don't think any of us are quite the same. I think life did change, some of it for good, some of it for just neutral, or some of it for different, or whatever it might be. But I know specifically for me, my job changed a little bit, in which I don't have to travel quite as much anymore, which is a nice thing. So I'm able to do a lot of work virtually now that I didn't get to do before. So that's a good thing. I get to be around more. Certainly the work we did with Henry during that time, with his therapists, who are all fantastic. We were actually able to have, with masks and safety and everything during those times, we were able to have in-home therapists that really were just transformational in our family's journey and helping our son. So, I think all of the work that we did during that time just brought us together closer as a family, and created a different piece of perspective. Certainly for me, I learned a lot, and I think I'm a different person on the other side, and a better person, I would think.
What's one thing that you learned during the pandemic?
What I learned during the pandemic was something about being a parent that I think is, maybe it was more of a reinforcement than learning it specifically, but I've always been of the mind that none of us really have it figured out. Sometimes parents want to put on the show that, I know everything and here's how things are supposed to be done, but you're never really sure what variables are going to be thrown in your way. And so it's definitely an active improv. And it's something you have to do on the fly. We're all learning all the time. And I'm always, a big believer in being open to that, learning from the experience and doing the best you can in a given moment. And I feel like we were faced with a lot of challenges during COVID, specifically around the area of like, okay, what is safe? What is not safe? And there was a lot of debate around that. And as parents, we had to make a lot of decisions that were sometimes very difficult. But I think part of that is being able to look back on that time and say that we made the best decisions that we could with the information that we had. And to be at peace with that, and then to just learn and grow through that. And I also really learned, in writing the blog, I really learned the value of journaling. I mean, I know writers talk about this all the time, but for me to have sat and written every single day about experiences my family were having, I'm able to look back at that when I wrote the book. I was surprised how many things I, completely forgotten about. Like there are chapters in this book that were stories that I would have forgotten, had I not written it down. And that's another thing I would really encourage parents everywhere to take a couple minutes at the end of every day and just do a little journaling, even if it's just a couple of little things that happened, something funny, something good, something bad, whatever, just to give you a record. And so to have that touch point to look back, because this time with your kids does go by so fast.
What are a couple books you've read recently that you really loved?
That is a really good question. One book that I read not too long ago is another good memoir called "And You May Find Yourself: Confessions of a Late Blooming Gen X Weirdo" by Sari Bodden. And this is a really fun book to read. It's another kind of great book of stories. I'm a Gen Xer myself, so I was kind of drawn to that one. I really enjoyed that book. I'm going to plug another book from a friend of mine, called Deformity Anyway, that I finished reading just recently, from Heather Saville Preston. This is a great book of stories that she did, coming from like her Scottish heritage. It's a really interesting book. And another book that I don't have a copy of right in front of me, but another book of mine, from a friend of mine named Sarah Simarusti, called Echolocation, is one that I'm just starting to get into now. So I'm excited about that too. Oh, Amelia wants to recommend a series. That's a good question. We should. Amelia's into Harry Potter now, so there's a good plug for that. In fact, Dad's going to have to read those at some point, so that I can better relate with you on those.
Is there anything else that you want us to know about your book?
I think it's what I would say about the book is I hope it's something that's entertaining. It's a quick read, something that parents can kind of look back on, or anyone can really look back on and say like, wow, what a strange time that was. I know it's, it's sort of in the rearview mirror, but it's still with us. And I also think that it is still important to look back on those times and understand, kind of what we went through and come to terms with it. And do it, at least in my case, in a way that's hopefully a little bit lighthearted and also honest. And I think honesty in parenting is a big thing, and that's something I'm really trying to communicate with this book too. And I'd certainly say specifically to dads, because there are a lot of, I know this coming, from a tradition of, the kind of where men don't have the same kind of emotional connection necessarily with their kids, and I think that's something I've really tried to develop with mine, and it's something that has really enriched my life, and I would certainly encourage other fathers to do the same and really be not just physically but emotionally present with their kids, and that's part of what's in the book too.
Can you read us a short passage from your book?
A short passage? Well, sure, I will. Amelia, thank you. I thank you for asking. So here's I'm going to read a chapter, a little short chapter here called Unholy Choice, which gets into a bit of what I was just talking about before, about all these kind of difficult decisions we would always have to make. So, unholy choice. My college friends and I used to spend ridiculous amounts of time playing a game we would call Unholy Choice, also known to many others as Would You Rather. It was basically each of us posing a series of equally horrifying scenarios and asking the others which they would choose. For example, one of my all-time favorites was, would you rather, for the duration of 1 year, wear clothes made only from steel wool, or wear a costume of the McDonaldland character Grimace for that same amount of time? With the Grimace costume, you could never tell anyone why you were wearing it. So if, unfortunately, you had to attend a family event, be it a wedding, funeral, or birthday party, people would stare at you in disgust and ask, why, for God's sakes, are you wearing a giant purple Grimace costume? You could only shrug and offer no explanation. So posed here is a pretty clear choice about what kind of pain you'd prefer to experience. Would you rather take the physical discomfort of wearing steel wool clothes, or the mental and emotional trauma involved with becoming a pariah to all your loved ones for wearing nothing but a Grimace costume for 12 months? Being a parent in the time of COVID felt an awful lot like playing a real game of unholy choice. We were constantly faced with equally awful choices, not just for ourselves, but for our children, and we had to navigate them daily. Do we choose crushing disappointment for our kids or potential infection for our kids? Both super fun options. Both have short-term consequences, whether that's screaming or crying or coughing and wheezing, as well as potential long-term consequences. In this case, that could be steeping bitterness for longing of a childhood whimsy lost forever, or the lingering symptoms of long COVID. This played out in so many ways during the pandemic. Unholy choice draws for us included things like, hey, one of the kids has a birthday coming up. Our choices are A, stay bunkered in the house, having yet another box mix cake and watch a movie, or B, have a proper birthday party and risk our kids, friends, and family getting long COVID. Next question, hey, our son has been diagnosed with autism. Our choices are A, stay bunkered in the house, isolated from all humanity, including therapists and support professionals who can really help him, or B, get him working with excellent therapists who may also be viral vectors and, once again, long COVID. Hey, my niece is graduating from high school and there's a family celebration back in Wisconsin. Our choices are A, stay bunkered at home, send a card, and eventually see a few pictures of the event, missing the special moment in the life of a dear family member, or B, travel across the country and through several COVID hotspots to celebrate, enjoy some human contact, and potentially long COVID. Or hey, I dislocated my toe because I fell down in the backyard while cleaning up dog poop. That is an actual story. My choices are A, stay bunkered up at home and stay away from the potential infection stew that is a local urgent care in the middle of a pandemic and just shove the toe back in myself, or B, seek proper medical attention at the local urgent care, leading to certain repair of my toe with a side potential of long COVID. Either way, we parents are always put squarely in the position of being at best a buzzkill, killjoy, or whatever the kids are saying these days. At worst, we could be in the position of making a regrettable health and safety decision. Either way, it didn't feel good. It was an unholy choice. And while we erred on the side of extreme caution, we often did not. We were fortunate to have made it through that period, even while taking some measured risks without getting sick. Still, the unholy choice felt like something we were dealing with on a constant basis. It's stressful enough to be making big decisions for our family or our kids without also throwing two major factors into the mix: mortality and uncertainty. We knew the virus was potentially deadly or debilitating. Where children were concerned, there were those who were basically saying kids just weren't getting infected at all, and others who were saying, yeah, it's not common, but if you do get it, look out. There were lots of horror stories of a long COVID and lingering effects like loss of focus and energy. How real a risk was it? I still feel like it's hard to assess even now. It was still a real struggle for a guy like me, with one section of the brain being dominated by Mr. Spock level statistically driven logic, and the other section being ruled by panic level anxiety reacting to the smallest of threats. I read lots of articles and listened to lots of podcasts interviewing specialists and professionals trying to understand how to make the best, safest decisions. From what was understood at the time, mine and my wife's concern about potential child infection was that the chances of infection and serious illness were not zero. Rationally, I could look at the data sets and see the chances for problems for kids were low, but as parents thinking about the welfare of our two children, we had a hard time processing anything that was much above zero. And there was an uncertainty. We know a lot more about COVID now, obviously, than we did in spring and summer of 2020, which is an easy bar to clear because back then we knew pretty much nothing. Back then, we had to make all these calls with very little information and lots of fear. Looking back, I can see things I would have done differently had I known now, but I also don't regret making the decisions that we made at the time because we were operating with the best intentions and knowledge we had then. One of the biggest unholy choices in 2020 and 2021 was around the issue of school. There was a constant push-pull of whether in-person school was safe or not. It's an issue that remains a point of contention because there certainly were learning losses for many children associated with school closures. We did, for our part, keep our kids home during the virtual school in 2020 with all its ups and downs. As with other things, we tried our best to weigh that particular unholy choice the best we could. By the time we reached fall of 2021, there was plenty of evidence, technique, and practice to show that with masking and basic precautions, schools could slide into an area of risk that was more acceptable to us, and the kids went back. Was school a risk-free environment? No, but there's also the counterpoint of the fact that kids do need in-person interaction that school offers, and virtual school was at best a temporary band-aid for most. This was an example for us to weigh the risks and benefits. Life always presents us with unholy choices. During the height of the COVID pandemic, the choices were particularly cruel and unusual. As time went on, some choices got a little easier, but I'm sure I'm not alone hearing that tiny contrary voice in my head questioning, is this safe? Unholy choices are not unique to the years 2020 and 21. That being said, if you chose the Grimace costume in the year 2020, most of us never left our homes anyway, so that really would have worked out pretty well. So thank you for taking the time to watch this. I appreciate it. Thank you, Boulder Bookstore. You can go and pick up a copy of my book, Fence Bat, there. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.